Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our, I think it's our fourth in a series. I forget which day it is, but welcome to the AISL office hours for FY22. Thank you for sharing part of your afternoon with us, and we hope that the information we'll go through is helpful to you as you begin or continue to work on your concepts for proposal submission. My name is Julie Johnson. I'm the co-lead for the AISL program, and I'm joined by several colleagues. So let me turn over Sandy.
I'm Sandy Welch, also a program officer in AISL.
And I'm Ellen McCauley. I'm also a program officer in the Advancing Informal STEM Learning program.
And we also have Juanita Morris, who is working with us this year as a science assistant. So she is also part of the AISL team. All right, so without further ado, Ellen, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about 4 different things. We're going to talk about the NSF merit review criteria, the solicitation specific review criteria, then we're going to jump into evaluation and then have a specific focus on advisory boards. So one thing that we always want to remind folks is that the entire agency of the National Science Foundation reviews proposals based on 2 concepts: the intellectual merit of a project and the broader impacts of a project. So what does intellectual merit mean? It means how a project is advancing knowledge or our understanding within its own field or across different fields. So in Advancing Informal STEM Learning, we are asking you to advance our understanding of how people learn and or learning environments in the informal sector. Broader impacts. What we mean by that is, what is the benefit to society or a segment of society of your project? So what you learn and how you do it, how does it have an impact on those around you, individuals, communities, the nation? And it may be, you may focus more on individuals, it may be focused more on communities, it may be more on the nation, but think about what the broader impacts is and what value, why should NSF invest in your project, both for the intellectual merit and the broader impacts of the project. And so under that, you see that I've already addressed the first question of advancing knowledge and benefit to society. There are 5 questions total. The next 4 address both intellectual merit and broader impacts. To what extent do the proposed activities suggest and explore creative, original, or potentially transformative concepts? And we mean this both in terms of the intellectual component of the project and the societal benefit of the project. The third is the plan carrying out the proposed activities in a well-reasoned, well-organized, and in a way that's based on a sound rationale? Does the plan incorporate a mechanism to assess success? Now, we're going to specifically be talking about assessing success and iterative improvement today. But again, I'm reading these out loud because often folks forget that both broader impacts and intellectual merit, these are the questions that reviewers look at with respect to your proposal. The 4th question is, how well qualified is the individual, the team, and the institution to do this particular project? And finally, are there adequate resources available to the PI, either at the home institutions or through collaborations that includes asking NSF for funding to carry out the proposed activities? So as part of this series, we are wanting to highlight that as you write your proposal, consider these 5 questions that reviewers will be considering and NSF program officers will be considering in the review of your proposal, and think about having a colleague, not someone on your team, but a colleague read your proposal against these questions and provide you with some feedback along the way. Now, in addition to these 5 specific the 5 questions that across all NSF programs, AISL has 2 solicitation specific review criteria questions. We are a broadening participation program, And so we ask that you also include, to what extent does the proposal identify the characteristics and needs of the focus of the underrepresented group, whether it's public or professional, that is being served. So if you have a focus on underrepresented groups, you do need to identify the characteristics and the needs of the underrepresented groups. And then the second part, the second question, excuse me, is to what extent does the proposal include specific plans or strategies for addressing or accommodating the interests and needs of these groups? So it may be a community or cultural perspectives, educational needs, etc. And with that, we will now turn to evaluation. That said, if you do have questions about the merit review criteria or how it is used, please also include those in your questions in the chat. So evaluation. How is evaluation framed in the AISL solicitation? Julie.
So one thing to understand about evaluation is that it occurs at two levels. And what we're talking about here in this first part is the evaluation of the overall project, right? So there's two goals in evaluation in terms of the 5,000-foot level, let's say, of your project. And that's whether it's a pilot and feasibility study, research and service to practice, and innovations and development, a conference proposal, a lit review. There is this notion of iterative improvement and accountability, right? So how are you understanding the degree to which the plan that you created is moving forward, and it is moving forward in a way that you originally anticipated and are able to make course corrections along the way? How are you understanding the degree to which you are achieving, working towards, or needed to make some changes to the original goals and quality of your work? So those are two types of goals for evaluation of the project overall. But of course, depending on the kind of work you're going to do, you may also have embedded in that particular evaluative pieces around developing a product, developing a program, et cetera, which is about the iteration done to understand how it works, how the thing that you are creating, working on, works with certain groups of people or not. But I do want to say we're looking in this particular slide, this notion of the evaluation of the project. Next slide. Therefore, again, thinking about the role, right? So it might be making adjustments, right? It might be thinking more deeply about the effectiveness of the particular outcomes of your project, right? The degree to which, there's integrity applied to the quality, the kind of work in which you engage, right? And satisfactory progress does not mean that there won't be things that are problematic, but you have some way of thinking about moving forward, moving your work forward, the team's work forward, et cetera. Next slide. So some elements of a project evaluation would include these, right? There would actually be evaluation questions for your project. Not just this sort of hand wave, oh, we're going to measure success, right? Reviewers are getting much more savvy. They want to understand what your evaluative questions are, that you have a process in place for identifying from whom or where are you going to collect evidence. So is it from participants? Is it from the team members? Who is it from? How are you going to collect it? Who are you going to collect it from? How are they identified? So similar things that you would do if you were doing evaluation of a program element or a product, similar to what you would do if you were mounting a your research study. It's what are your questions? How are you going to, what evidence do you need to collect? From whom are you collecting it? And how you're going to analyze it, right? And then finally, who is providing the expertise in this space, right? An often asked question is what's most problematic about evaluation in any proposals that we see. And I would say what's problematic is this hand wave thing. We're gonna measure success, and there's no clear sense of what that means from the point of view of the project. So be mindful of that. Next slide. So when we talk about evaluation for iterative or continuous improvement, these might be things that you consider, right? So you might have cycles of evaluation as identified here. This is often the case in our R&D type projects, which are innovations in development or broad implementation, right? So we've got evaluation now at the level of the project and what we're doing, which is also part of and can be embedded in the evaluation of the project writ large, right? So specifically for particular projects, there may be some iterative cycles within this larger, what are we doing, how are we doing it, how's it moving forward? Evaluations need to be independent and rigorous, right? The degree to which you identify who your evaluator or evaluators are and the plan in place, you also need to talk about how there's distance or the degree of distance between the people engaged in the work and how the evaluation of that work is occurring, right? So these are also things to think about. Yes, Ellen? Oh, okay. So next slide. Sometimes evaluation is also used in terms of building additional knowledge and understanding around a phenomenon, a group of products, a set of people and interactions. Sometimes these are often done as research and service to practice proposals, but there's also a line of continuous evaluative thinking that might go into certain work that also allows you to build knowledge and to advance an understanding on behalf of the field. So projects that use evaluation to achieve knowledge building need to describe how their approaches to evaluation achieve three things, right? That it does support iterative improvement, that it does support promote accountability, and that it's building knowledge with respect to understanding STEM learning in informal environments. So again, I mentioned this before about there's the project level evaluation, and then there might be evaluative aspects in terms of the R&D work that is being done. Next slide, please.
All right, so one approach to evaluation or parts of the evaluation are advisory boards. So advisory boards can be connected with any component of the AISL project or the AISL proposal. And they can encourage collaboration, they can provide specific insight. It's basically bringing expertise and perspectives to the work being conducted. And it can be on, some projects have multiple advisory boards. We often get a question of, can you have youth advisory boards? Yes, you can have community advisory boards, youth advisory boards, methodological advisory boards. It really depends on what you're looking for. And so when you're considering establishing an advisory board, think about what's the overall purpose of your work and what role do you want the advisory board to be giving you advice on. So what questions are you asking? How is your project set up for the core team to participate, and what external views? So if you're tackling a problem where the data is really messy, you may want to have some folks who have very different expertise than you, or who code similar kinds of work to take a look at your data and help you figure out a coding scheme. This could be an advisory board. You could also have an advisory board that brings in perspectives on program design. So again, it goes back to, and the slides all of a sudden started advancing themselves. That's interesting. You know, it really gets down to as you have designed your project, you have a team. Your team is not the entire world. So this is a proposal to the National Science Foundation. Who else would you like coming in at various points in your project and giving you some external perspectives, poking a little bit so you can think about and strengthen your work? In this regard, advisory boards are part of that iterative improvement component of the evaluation requirement for AISL proposals, because however they give you advice, they are helping you iteratively improve what you had originally planned and how it's playing out. So the purpose, it can give you advice on content, for example, the coding, context, community perspectives, youth perspectives, broader impacts, how you are actually disseminating your work. So the societal impacts, how you are getting the work out there. Broadening participation, so reaching communities that you would really like to benefit from and work with. We talk a lot about working with projects as opposed to working, doing things to or for. And then accountability. You can have an advisory board, and this often happens in projects that are research and service to practice. You can have an advisory board that looks at accountability. Have you done what you said you were going to do, or have you grown from what you said you were going to do? And what is the quality of that work? So an advisory board, in that structure, it usually has a lead and a number of people, and they comment on the quality of the work you've done so far, either writ large or in very specific areas. And again, one of the things that the AISL solicitation says over and over, and I think we as program officers say, there isn't a cookie cutter AISL proposal, and there isn't a cookie cutter evaluation for an AISL proposal. Your budget should match your scope of work. Your evaluation should match your scope of work and the needs of the project. It all ties in together.
So in thinking about advisors, right, individuals, and thinking about advisory boards, groups of individuals, these are some things, and actually these capture some of the comments we've made in the last 10, 15 minutes or so in terms of thinking about evaluation in different aspects of your project. But I do want to say it's not about checking a box. So there are different ways to engage your advisors or advisory groups, and you want to be intentional about that. And frankly, you know, your people that you invite to be advisors should be asking you really pointed questions, right? What are you doing, Julie? Why do you want me to be part of this project? How do you want to engage me? What goes beyond rubber stamping, right? So the advisors that you gather once a year to tell you, hey, that's a really good job, and you never see them again, that's not a good use of an advisor or an advisory group, right? So really thinking about the benefit both to your project and to those that you might invite to give you insights, to support your thinking, to oversight of your project. So be really intentional as you think about engaging individuals or groups of individuals to be advisors. Next slide. In that same vein, then, as we think about the use of advisors for evaluation, so next slide. This would be a similar process to hiring somebody else to be an evaluator, right? Which means you need to identify these individuals early. It would not be appropriate for you to go and plan out and write your proposal and write the evaluation plan and then hand it over to an advisory group and go, here, evaluate us. No. You need to, if you're going to use an advisory group as your external evaluator, then you need to engage them early in the process. They need to be the ones that are writing the plan based on what you have said about what you want to do. They will be the ones to identify what sources of evidence they think are appropriate to collect to help understand what success looks like. They will be the ones to analyze the data and write your report and give you feedback. So if you are the driver and you're creating all the questions and you're doing all of the work, then that's not, then you're doing your evaluation, and that's fine. But if you're going to use an advisory group to do evaluation, then that's where the work needs to be placed. So again, think about that, right? You don't have to use an advisory group to do the evaluation. You can go a traditional route and hire an evaluator from some other place in your organization, in your community, one of your partners. But if you're going to use external advisory boards, then that is where the work needs to occur. Next slide. So finally, as with all of the webinars that we're doing here, here are some additional resources that are specific to this topic that may help you think through what you want to do and how you want to do it. Again, as Ellen said earlier, there is no one way to do evaluation. There is no one mechanism to use for evaluation. It's got to be what makes sense to you and the kind of work in which you're engaged, right? So hopefully these are additional resources beyond our time today that will help you as you and your team think about this more carefully. Thank you.